Hey everyone, back again. Welcome back to another video Hey everyone, back again. Welcome back to another video review. Sorry about that. This time, everyone, we are going to be taking a look at, well, an awesome and outstanding, fantastic time of the year once more. Yes, we're taking a look at the 2023 Stanley Cup Finals. This is the Southern Edition, literally, between the Las Vegas Golden Knights and the Florida Panthers. This was interesting. An interesting final. No one predicted that this would happen, but it did. So, for the Florida Panthers, they snuck into the playoffs, like winning the last 6 games of the regular season, and just pretty much, stuck into the final spot. Their journey was interesting. They took down the first seeded Boston Bruins in 7 games after being down 3-1. Hell yeah! Then they took out the Toronto Maple Leafs in 5 games, which congrats to the Maple Leafs for finally getting past round 1 after so long. That's another story. And then they swept the Carolina Hurricanes in 4 games, getting to this point. Vegas was interesting because they didn't have all their bodies in the lineup to start with. And they didn't even have Aiden Hill as their starting goalie. It was Laurent Brossoit until he got injured in round 2. Essentially, they took out the Winnipeg Jets in 5 games, beat the Edmonton Oilers in 6 games, and then masterminded the Dallas Stars in 6 games. It was quite a wild series. Dallas almost came back, and that would have been something. But here we are. Here we are at long last. The Stanley Cup Finals. The Stanley Cup Finals, this year's edition. And yeah, so it was amazing. Really, really was outstanding and truly fantastic, to say the least. In the first period, Eric Staal scores shorthanded. A nice little wraparound assisted by Anton Lundell. Makes it 1-0 Panthers. However, Jonathan Marchessault on the power play gets his 10th of the playoffs from Chandler Stevenson and Shea Theodore to tie the game at 1. But in the second period, Shea Theodore scores again to give the Vegas Golden Knights a 2-1 lead, assisted by Brayden McNabb and Quentin Howden. However, Anthony Duclair scores unassisted, his 4th of the playoffs, to tie the game at 2. In the third period, however, Vegas breaks it open finally. Zach Whitecloud gets the 2nd of the playoffs from Ivan Barbashev and Jack Eichel. Makes it a 3-2 lead. Then Mark Stone scores unassisted his 7th of the playoffs, which would give the Golden Knights a 4-2 lead. And finally, Riley Smith gets his 3rd of the playoffs from Jack Eichel to get on the power play, giving Vegas the 5-2 lead, which ultimately would be the final result. In the first period on the power play, Jonathan Marchessault gets his 11th of the playoffs from Chandler Stevenson and Jack Eichel again, which would give Vegas a 1-0 lead. However, Alec Martinez would add to that his 1st of the playoffs from Ivan Barbashev and Jonathan Marchessault, which would give Vegas a 2-0 lead. In the second period, Nicolas Waugh gets his 2nd of the playoffs from William Carrier and Zach Whitecloud to give Vegas a 3-0 lead. However, Brett Howden would add to that with his 4th of the playoffs from Mark Stone and Chandler Stevenson to give Vegas the 4-0 lead. In the third period, however, Anton Lundell gets a 2nd of the playoffs from Anthony Duclair. It was a very wacky one. Gives them the 4-1 lead. However, Jonathan Marchessault again gets his 12th of the playoffs from Jack Eichel. Gives him a 5-1 lead. And then, this is funny, Michael Amario gets his 4th of the playoffs, and William Karlsson gives Vegas a 6-1 lead. Then Matthew Tkachuk, his 10th of the playoffs from Sam Bennett, and Mahura, sorry, names escaped me. Anyways, it's pretty much 6-2 at this point. And then, pretty much on the power play, Brett Howden, his 5th of the playoffs from Michael Amario and William Carrier, giving Vegas the 7-2 lead, which ultimately would be the final score in the second game. In the first period, Brandon Montour gets the 7th of the playoffs from Matthew Tkachuk and Eric Stahl. Gives him a 1-0, which would give the Panthers a 1-0 lead. However, Mark Stone would tie the game on the power play from Jonathan Marchessault and Shea Theodore, tying the game at 1. In the second period, however, Jonathan Marchessault again gets his 13th of the playoffs from Jack Eichel and Mark Stone, on the power play, giving Vegas the 2-1 lead. But then in the third period, in the final dying seconds, Matthew Tkachuk ties the game at 2. His 11th of the playoffs from Carter Verhaeghe and Aaron Ekblad, tying the game at 2, sending the game to overtime. And then, in the overtime period, Carter Verhaeghe gets the 7th of the playoffs from Sam Bennett and Gustav Forsling, which would give Florida the win. In that particular game, and their first career Stanley Cup final victory, as of course this was their second appearance since 1996, when they were swept by Patrick Roy and the Colorado Avalanche. I was 1 year old when that happened. And for Vegas, this was their second appearance since losing to the Washington Capitals in 5 games back in their first season. In the first period, Chandler Stevenson gets his 9th of the playoffs from Zach Whitecloud and Mark Stone, which would give Vegas the 1-0 lead. But then in the second period, Chandler Stevenson again gets his 10th of the playoffs from Mark Stone and Nicholas Hague, giving Vegas the 2-0 lead. However, William Karlsson would add to that with his 11th of the playoffs from Nicholas Hague and Jonathan Marchessault, giving Vegas the 3-0 lead. However, things get interesting. Brandon Montour gets his 8th of the playoffs from Alexander Barkov, which would cut the lead to 2. And then, early on in the third period, Alexander Barkov gets his 5th of the playoffs from Brandon Montour and Anton Lundell, which would cut the deficit to 1. Florida tried everything in their power to tie the game, to make the series look interesting, hoping for the best, living by the sword, dying by the sword, but they were unable to, as they failed to tie it, and then they won the game, and then fights ensued, and that was the end of the game. In the first period, Mark Stone gets his 9th of the playoffs, unassisted, short-handed, which would give Vegas the 1-0 lead. Then Nicholas Hague would score his 2nd of the playoffs from Jack Eichel and Jonathan Marchessault, giving Vegas the 2-0 lead. In the second period, however, Aaron Ekblad gets his 2nd of the playoffs from Nick Cousins, cutting the deficit to 1. However, things would get a little sour for the Panthers as Alec Martinez gets his 2nd of the playoffs and his 2nd of the finals, assisted by Jack Eichel and Alex Pietrangelo, giving Vegas the 3-1 lead. Riley Smith would add to that with his 4th of the playoffs from William Karlsson and Shea Theodore, giving Vegas the 4-1 lead. Then Mark Stone would get his 10th of the playoffs from Brett Howden and Chandler Stevenson, giving Vegas the 5-1 lead. Then, there you are. Then Michael Amadio, is it Amadio, or is it Michael Mario or Michael Amario? Just correct it off in the comments. He gets his 5th of the playoffs from Riley Smith. It's 6-1 Vegas. Then the third period, things get a little interesting. Ivan Barbashev gets his 7th of the playoffs from Jack Eichel and Shea Theodore, giving Vegas a 7-1 lead. Then Sam Reinhart gets his 8th of the playoffs from Sam Bennett and Brandon Montour, giving Vegas a 7-2 lead. Then Sam Bennett gets his 5th of the playoffs for Gustav Forslind, and Sam Reinhart coming to like 4. So it's 7-3 at this point. Then Mark Stone ceremoniously gets his 11th of the playoffs, empty net, unassisted, making it 8-3 Vegas. And then finally, Nicholas Waugh, his 3rd of the playoffs from Shea Theodore and Braden McNabb, giving Vegas the 9-3 lead and ultimately winning the Cup in 5 games. And finally, for the Vegas Golden Knights, their first career championship, like, in the city that never sleeps. So, this was interesting. This was awesome. It was super amazing. This was pure redemption for the Vegas Golden Knights after losing to the Capitals in 5 games back in 2017-2018. Coach Bruce Cassidy, this was pure redemption for him because, of course, he a year ago was fired by the Boston Bruins and replaced by Jim Montgomery. We all know how that ended in the playoffs for them. Sorry, sorry, Boston. Yeah, and of course some familiar experience. Pietrangelo, Alec Martinez, even the addition of Jonathan Quick, guiding Adin Hill with the advice that he was given was just pure amazement. And Mark Stone, pure awesomeness, and oh yeah, and Jonathan Marchessault, so truly amazement. Of course, he winning the Conn Smythe. Of course, he was part of the 6 remaining players that were a part of the previous Cup final. William Karlsson, and then there was a few others. Of course, they'll be listed in the end credits, but essentially, Vegas avenged themselves. They avenged themselves. They were pure. They were crisp. They were golden. They were the Golden Knights. And for the Panthers, congratulations to them. I'll commend them for not only winning a game in the finals, because of course I said they were swept the last time they were there, but of course with the guidance of Paul Maurice. This was his 2nd Cup final since 2002 when he took the Carolina Hurricanes to the finals and they lost to the Detroit Red Wings, coached then by Scotty Bowman. So it was amazing, it really was. All in all, this Stanley Cup final was truly outstanding and amazing. Huge props to the Vegas Golden Knights all in all. Super awesome that they were able to achieve their greatness, their legacy, their dynasty. It was amazing. It was fantastic, and I'm curious to see what will happen in next year's Stanley Cup final because a majority of the Vegas Golden Knights, well, of course, Canadian, which was awesome. But now, 30 years later, it's time for Canada to rise the cup. So, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens next year. So anyways, guys, that's my video review of the 2023 Stanley Cup Finals between the Stanley Cup champion Vegas Golden Knights and the Florida Panthers. I will see you all very soon. I'll be back as soon as possible in the next video. And yes, to take everyone, see you soon and good day, and I shall catch you later. Bye-bye.